There weren't as many boys at the evening practice, not by half. "Where's Bernard?" asked Ender. Eli grinned. Shen closed his eyes and assumed a look of blissful meditation. "Haven't you heard?" said another boy, a launchie from a younger group. "Word's out that any launchie who comes to your practice sessions won't ever amount to anything in anybody's army. Word's out that the commanders don't want the soldiers who have been damaged by your training." Ender nodded. "By the way, I brain it," said the launchie. "I be the best soldier I can, and any commander worth a damn, he take me. Nah?" "Eh," said Ender with finality. They went on with practice. About a half hour into it, they were practicing throwing off collisions with frozen soldiers. Several commanders in different uniforms came in. They ostentatiously took down names. "Hey," shouted Eli, "make sure you spell my name right." The next thing there were even fewer boys. Now Ender was hearing the stories. Little launchies getting slapped around in the bathrooms or having accidents in the mess hall and the game room, or getting their files trashed by older boys who had broken the primitive security system that guarded the launchies' desks. "No practice tonight," Ender said. "The hell there's not," said Eli. "Give it a few days. I don't want any of the little kids getting hurt. If you stop even one night, they'll figure it works to do this kind of thing, just like if you've ever backed down to Bernard back when he was being a swine." "Besides," said Shen, "we aren't scared and we don't care, so you owe it to us to go on. We need practice and so do you." Ender remembered what Dink had said. The game was trivial compared to the whole world. Why should anybody give every night of his life to this stupid, stupid game? "We don't accomplish that much anyway," Ender said. He started to leave. Eli stopped him. "They scare you too? They slap you up in the bathroom, stick your head in the pissa? Somebody gots a gun up, you bung? Somebody gots a gun up, you bung?" "No," said Ender. "You still my friend?" asked Eli more quietly. "Yes." "Then I still you friend, Ender, and I stay there and practice with you." The older boys came again, but fewer of them were commanders. Most were members of a couple of armies. Ender recognized salamander uniforms, even a couple of rats. They didn't take names this time. Instead, they mocked and shouted and ridiculed as the launchies tried to master difficult skills with untrained muscles. They began to get a few of the boys. "Listen to them," Ender said to the other boys. "Remember the words. If you ever want to make your enemy crazy, shout that kind of stuff at them. It makes them do dumb things to be mad, but we don't get mad." Shen took the idea to heart, and after each jibe from the older boys, he and a group of 4 launchies recite the words loudly 5 or 6 times. When they started singing the taunts like nursery rhymes, some of the older boys launched themselves from the wall and came out for a fight. The flash suits were designed for wars fought with harmless light. They offered little protection and seriously hampered movement if it came to hand-to-hand fighting in Nolo. Half the boys were flashed anyway and couldn't fight, but the stiffness of their suits made them potentially useful. Ender quickly ordered his launchies to gather in one corner of the room. The older boys laughed at them even more, and some who had waited by the wall came forward to join in the attack, seeing Ender's group in retreat. Ender and Eli decided to throw a frozen soldier in the face of an enemy. The frozen launchies struck helmet first, and the two caromed off each other. The older boy clutched his chest where the helmet had hit him, and screamed in pain. The mockery was over. The rest of the older boys launched themselves to enter battle. Ender didn't really have much hope of any of the boys getting away without some injury, but the enemy was coming haphazardly, uncoordinatedly, and they'd never worked together before. While Ender's little practice army, though there were only a dozen of them now, knew each other well and knew how to work together. "Go Nova!" shouted Ender. The boys laughed and they gathered into 3 groups, feet together, squatting, holding hands so they formed small stars against the back of the wall. "We'll go around them and make for the door. Now!" At his signal, the 3 stars burst apart, each boy launching in different directions, but angled so he could rebound off a wall and head for the door. Since all 5 of the enemy were in the middle of the room, there were course changes far more difficult. Where course changes were far more difficult, It was an easy maneuver to carry out. Ender had positioned himself so that when he launched, he would rendezvous with the frozen soldier he had just used as a missile. The boy wasn't frozen now, and he let Ender catch him, whirl him around, and send him toward the door. Unfortunately, the necessary result of the action was for Ender to head in the opposite direction, and at a fairly slowly and at a reduced speed. Alone of all his soldiers, he was drifting fairly slowly, and the end of the battle room where the older boys were gathered. He shifted himself so he could see all his soldiers were safely gathered at the far wall. In the meantime, the furious and disorganized enemy had just spotted him. Ender calculated how soon he would reach the wall so he could launch again. Not soon enough. Several enemies had already rebounded toward him. Ender was startled to see Stilson's face among them. Then he shuddered and realized he had been wrong. Still, it was the same situation, and this time they wouldn't sit still for a single combat settlement. There was no leader as far as Ender knew, and these boys were a lot bigger than him. Still, he had learned some things about the weight shifting in personal combat class and about the physics of moving objects. Game battles almost never got to hand-to-hand combat. You never bumped into an enemy that wasn't frozen unless you were frozen yourself. So in the few seconds he had, Ender tried to position himself to receive his guests. Fortunately, they knew as little about nullo fighting as he did, and the few who tried to punch were found that throwing a punch was pretty ineffective when their bodies moved backwards just as quickly as their fists moved forwards. But there were some in the group who had a bone breaking on their minds, as Ender quickly saw. He didn't plan to be there for it, though. He caught one of the punchers by the arm and threw him as hard as he could. It hurled Ender out of the way in the rest of the first onslaught. Though he still wasn't getting any closer to the door. "Stay there," he shouted at his friends, who were obviously forming up to come and rescue him. "Just stay there." Someone caught Ender by the foot. The tight grip gave Ender some leverage. He was able to stamp firmly on the other boy's ear and shoulder, making him cry out and let go. If the boy had let go just as Ender kicked downward, it would have hurt him much less and allowed Ender to use the maneuver as a launch. Instead, the boy had hung on too well. His ear was torn and scattering blood in the air, and Ender was drifting even more slowly. "I'm doing it again," thought Ender. "I'm hurting people again, just to save myself. Why don't they leave me alone so I don't have to hurt them?" 3 more boys were converging on him now, and this time they were acting together. Still, they had to grab him before they could hurt him. Ender positioned himself quickly so that the 2 of them would take his feet, leaving his hands free to deal with the third. Sure enough, they took the bait. Ender grasped the shoulders of the third boy's shirt and pulled him up sharply, butting him in the face with his helmet. Again a scream and a shower of blood. The 2 boys who had legs were wrenching at them, twisting him. Ender threw the boys with the bleeding nose at one of them. They entangled, and Ender's leg became free. It was a simple matter then to use the other boy's hold for leverage and kick him firmly in the groin, then shove off him in the direction of the door. He didn't get that good a launch, so that his speed was nothing special, but it didn't matter. No one was following him. He got to his friends at the door. They caught him and handed him along the door. They were laughing and slapping him playfully. "You bad," they said. "You scary. You flame." "Practice is over for the day," Ender said. "They'll be back tomorrow," said Shen. "Won't do them any good," said Ender. "If they come without suits, we'll do this again. If they come with suits, we can flash them." "Besides," said Eli, "the teachers won't let it happen." Ender remembered what Dink had told him about and wondered if Eli was right. "Hey, Ender!" shouted one of the older boys as Ender left the battle room. "You nothing man! You be nothing!" "My old commander Bonzo," said Ender. "I think he doesn't like me." Ender checked the rosters on his desk that night. 4 boys turned up on medical report. 1 with bruised ribs, 1 with a bruised testicle, 1 with a torn ear, and 1 with a broken nose and a loose tooth. The cause of injury was the same in all cases. Accidental collision in null G. If the teachers weren't allowing that to turn up on the official report, it was obvious they didn't intend to punish anyone for the nasty little skirmish in the battle room. Aren't they going to do anything? Don't they care what goes on in the school? Since he was back to the barracks earlier than usual, Ender called up the fantasy game on his desk. It had been a while since he last used it, long enough that it didn't start him where he left off. Instead, he began by the giant's corpse, only now it was hardly identifiable as a corpse at all unless you stood off a ways and studied it. The body had eroded into a hill, entwined with grass and vines. Only the crest of the giant's face was still visible, and it was white bone, like limestone protruding from a discouraging, withering mountain. Ender did not look forward to fight with the wolf children again, but to his surprise they weren't there. Perhaps killed once, they were gone forever. It made him a little sad. He made his way down underground through the tunnels to the cliff ledge overlooking the beautiful forest. Again he threw himself down, and again a cloud caught him and carried him to the castle turret room. The snake began to unweave itself from the rug again, only this time Ender did not hesitate. He stepped on the head of the snake and crushed it under his foot. It writhed and twisted under him, and in response he twisted and ground it deeper into the stone floor. Finally it was still. Ender picked it up and shook it until it unwove itself and the patterned rug was gone. Then, still dragging the snake behind him, he began to look for a way out. Instead, he found a mirror, and in the mirror he saw a face that he easily recognized. It was Peter, with blood dripping down his chin and a snake's tail protruding from the corner of his mouth. Ender shouted and thrust his desk from him. A few of the boys in the barracks were alarmed at the noise, but he apologized and told them it was nothing. They went away. He looked again into his desk. His figure was still there, staring into the mirror. He tried to pick up some of the furniture, to break the mirror, but it could not be moved. The mirror would not come off the wall, either. Finally, Ender threw the snake at it. The mirror shattered, leaving a hole in the wall behind it. Out of the hole came dozens of tiny snakes, which quickly bit Ender's figure again and again. Tearing the snakes frantically from himself, the figure collapsed and died in a writhing heap of small serpents. The screen went blank and the words appeared. Play again? Ender signed off and put the desk away. The next day, several commanders came to Ender or sent soldiers to tell him not to worry. Most of them thought the extra practice sessions were a good idea. He should keep it up. And to make sure nobody bothered him, they were sending a few of their older soldiers who needed extra practice to come join him. They're as big as most of the buggers who attacked you last night. They'll think twice. Instead of a dozen boys, there were 45 that night. More than an army, and whether it was because of the presence of the older boys on Ender's side, or because they had had enough the night before, none of their enemies came. Ender didn't go back to the fantasy game, but it lived in his dreams. He kept remembering how it felt to kill the snake, grinding it in, the way he tore the ear off that boy, the way he destroyed Stilson, the way he broke Bernard's arm, and then to stand up holding the corpse of his enemy and find Peter's face looking out at him from the mirror. This game knows too much about me. The game tells filthy lies. I am not Peter. I don't have murder in my heart. And then a worse fear, that he was a killer, only better at it than Peter ever was, that it was the very trait that pleased the teachers. It's killers they need for the bugger wars. It's people who can grind enemies' face into the dust and spatter their blood all over space. Well, I'm your man. I'm the bloody bastard you wanted, and when you had me spawned, I'm your tool. And what difference does it make if I hate the part of me that you most need? What difference does it make that when the little serpents killed me in the game, I agreed with them and was glad?